It's been about 65 years since drywall took over from lath and plaster as the primary building material of choice for doing residential walls and commercial walls here in the United States. Now, this has been pretty easy to work with compared to lath and plaster, but for DIYers and homeowners, it can be super intimidating. So I'm happy to tell you about a discovery I made of a product that's a whole lot easier to use than drywall. This very light piece right here is made out of PVC. It's got a very simple internal structure, which actually makes it way more durable and way tougher and more impact resistant than drywall. And the best part is, it's actually so much easier to install. You just do one step. You put it up, you don't have to mud, tape, texture, paint, any of that. One step, and you're done. Now right off the bat, I want to let you know that I'm not receiving any money to do this. This is not something that I'm getting any affiliate commissions. I basically don't have any profit from this from the company that makes this. It's a company called TrustCore, and in fact, they didn't even reach out to me. That said, when I saw an ad for this, I was so curious about it, and I had so many doubts. I was skeptical that it was as good as they claimed, so I decided to reach out to them to ask more about it. Now, as I got to build a relationship with them, they were kind enough to send me out all the materials that you see in this garage. They walked me through the process and kind of taught me what's good and some of the pros and cons. This is not a perfect replacement in all ways. And my biggest question was, how much does this cost and how easy is it to install? So we're going to cover all of that for you, because I'll bet you have questions just like I did. And that's kind of the focus of this video, is let's answer all the questions that I had and probably that you have about this material to see if it's any good. The first question I had was, what is this stuff made of? Now, I mentioned earlier that it's made of PVC, and it's really pretty simple. It's 100% recyclable. It's called TrustCore because there's a structure of triangles in here that make up its core, and that's what, it's basically like a bunch of little trusses that give it its strength. So that's one of two things that does. One, it makes it really strong and durable and impact resistant, and then the surface material is thick enough that it's very durable. And the second thing is, it's mostly hollow. It's about 40% lighter than 1/2-inch drywall. Question number two, what size are TrustCore panels? So I mentioned just a minute ago that these are 1/2-inch thick. Now, to give you some point of reference here, they come in sizes about 12 feet tall. Now, they actually come in all different sizes. You can do 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, and I think 12 is a little bit more of the standard size that they come in. My whole garage is done up in these 12 feet panels, and they are 16 inches wide. One of these panels is about the equivalent of a 4x4 sheet. Now, let's talk about weight and what that means versus drywall. Hold on, I'm going to grab a sheet of drywall that I've got right here. That weighs 70 pounds. A standard sheet of 1/2-inch drywall weighs about 50 pounds, and ultralight 1/2-inch drywall weighs about 38 pounds. Now, the cool part is that TrustCore right here, 2 of these panels equals one 4x8 sheet of drywall, but the difference in weight is astronomical. But these weigh about 13 pounds each, so we're looking at about 26 pounds for a full sheet versus 38 or 50 or 70 pounds for these sheets. Now, obviously there's differences. The 5/8 is more dense, and you might have some questions about acoustics, right? Can it block sound? Can it block fire? We're going to cover all of that as well. My next question was, how does it actually attach to the wall? How do you install this stuff? Unlike drywall, we need to start with some trim. Now, this is kind of a different mindset than what we're used to working with drywall and sheetrock. I used some J-trim like this. It's called J-trim because of the shape of it. And this stuff installs really easily, and you're going to put this around the edges. In some cases, you might want to use a corner piece, or you can use J-trim if you prefer. It's just kind of a matter of preference. Now, the J-trim here installs using this little flange that's along the top, and this is the same type of flange that you're going to find on each of the panels as well. So that's what's going to do all the work and hold them in, and then the panels also have tongue and groove on the other side for interlocking into one another. TrustCore doesn't recommend using just any screws, certainly not drywall screws that have that kind of bugle-headed shape, because we want it to have a nice flat bottom between the shaft of the screw and the head needs to be 90 degrees. So we're going to use some different kinds of screws. These are called pan head or washer head. Truss head is another one name for that. But as you can see on these, they basically have just a nice flat head on them on the underside there, and that's exactly what we want, so that they sink in and then they actually just secure the whole thing down without separating it or pushing out the holes in the flange. It's been quite cold here in the garage because I haven't installed the heating and air conditioning system just yet, and it's the middle of winter, so I ended up putting a nickel-sized gap in each panel, and that allows a little expansion and contraction as the weather changes. Next, how do you work with this stuff? How do you cut it? How do you get the holes in it that you need to do? How do you cut it to length? All that. The easy answer is woodworking tools. Basically things that you most likely already have around the house, especially if you're a DIYer. Now, one of the things that came in handy more than I expected is a multi-tool, an oscillating saw like this, because this allows you to get into places that are a little bit tricky and kind of do some adjustments on the fly with this guy. Now, the thing that you want to keep in mind is you don't use a traditional woodworking blade on this. We're going to use a metal cutting blade. So it has a lot of fine, sharp teeth right here, as opposed to larger individual teeth. Same thing with the circular saw. There's a huge difference on this, which is I've just got a cheap Harbor Freight saw blade on here. It's a 56 tooth, so you want to kind of keep one between 40 and 60 teeth. But the big thing is here, I flipped it backwards. You're actually doing all your cutting with the back of the carbide teeth. Doesn't have to be anything too crazy or too expensive. Next, for the jigsaw, which is always really handy when you're doing any sort of work where you're having to cut out these squares or different shapes or things like that. Again, get a metal cutting blade on here, something with a lot of teeth, and it will do a great job. That's what I use there. And this is the only thing that I actually had to pick up was this pair right here. This is some traditional tin snips, which I could have used, and this is for cutting the trim, but I found this little set here by Crescent Wiss, which is just some titanium scissors, and these were easier to use than the tin snips for cutting the trim to length, and this did a great job. Again, had no issues using this, and it's just a little more compact, a little easier to work with. So basically for the most part, traditional woodworking tools with the right blades on them will allow you to do everything you need to do. The next question I had was, how tough is this stuff? That's one of the things they advertise as it being super tough. And in fact, check out some of these videos they've done to demonstrate this. They've got a professional pitcher in here who's throwing baseballs at it up to 72 miles an hour. Now, I can't recreate that myself. I throw like a girl and probably can do 30 miles an hour if I'm lucky, but you can see what happens when he's throwing this against truss core as opposed to drywall. It is a night and day difference. It just goes right through with drywall, or at least leaves a significant dent. So truss core is super tough in that sense. Another demo that they did was slapping a hockey puck at that thing at full speed, and you can see it leaves a little scuff potentially, especially if you hit it from the side, and then you just wipe that off with a rag and you're done. So this is seriously tough. I am positive that if you try to punch this as hard as you can, then you're just going to break your hand and probably cut it up too if you end up getting through at all. So that's not a challenge. Don't try it. Seeing as how this is kind of a plasticky looking material, I wondered about echo and sound transmission. I also wondered about the fire rating of this thing. How does that compare to drywall? The short answer to that is it's about the same as any half-inch piece of drywall in pretty much all of the stats. Now throughout this video, you're seeing some B-roll footage of me actually doing the install myself. I am a first-time installer here. I've never done this before. I just used the manual that they sent with it, and it helps me to be able to know exactly how to move step by step through the entire process. And while you're watching this, hopefully you can help me out a little bit. I'm trying to hit 1 million subscribers by the end of this year. I'm getting close, but I know I can do it with your help. So if you like this kind of content and want to learn more about DIY products and DIY tutorials and things like that, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Let's see if we can get to that 1 million. And once we do, I'm giving away all kinds of prizes, tool sets to different people who are subscribed to the channel. So thanks so much for your help with that. What about repairing damaged panels? How easy is it to patch it or to replace a panel? So first of all, as we've demonstrated earlier, it's very unlikely that you're ever going to need to do this. This stuff is so tough that it's really difficult to break. But what if you drill a hole in it, for example, to mount something, and then you want to take that hole out and patch over that? Well, you just use some caulking. If you've got a bigger hole, you might need to actually replace the panel. And in my mind, that's potentially one of the cons of this type of material is that, let's say I've got a hole the size of a fist, for example. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to caulk over that. So I'm going to have to actually replace the whole panel rather than just patch it. On the bright side, it's pretty easy to replace. You actually set the blade depth of your circular saw to just over 1/2 inch, and then you can cut right along it, and then you can remove that panel, remove the screws that were holding that one in as well, and then from there you caulk it, put the new panel in, fasten it into place, and then you're good to go. Now I just mentioned that it also comes in gray panels besides the white ones, and that makes me wonder, what are my options for colors? Does it come in every color? Can you paint it? How does that work? So the answer to that is it just comes in 2 colors. You just have a simple light gray and you have white. In my space, I opted to go with white everywhere because that's kind of the theme in my garage. I was able to get a hold of the right people and figure out exactly which paints work well with truss core, and there's quite a few. Fortunately, they come in pretty much all of the brands, from the Glidden brand that you can get at Walmart to Behr to Sherwin-Williams and everything in between. So I use some Behr that I picked up, and this is the Behr Premium Plus. You can get it in different finishes, so I've got satin enamel here, and decided to go with something pretty dark so that you can see the difference. And it painted really easy, just did 2 coats. The big difference is we're using exterior acrylic paint, not interior. So it's a lot thicker paint, and it's a little bit different than what you're used to buying for painting the interior walls. But it goes on really well. With 2 coats, this one went really quick. It was really easy, and it's pretty durable and good. You can kind of wash this stuff a little bit, so I've noticed that it's adhering quite well, so that's a good thing. So definitely paintable, and I think if you're going to paint this though, you probably want to use a sprayer, or at least be really careful if you have the little lines, the little gaps for expansion, because you don't want to see the white through whatever color you painted. So I think of this a lot like painting shiplap. You can do it by hand, but it's a lot easier if you use a sprayer to do it, and sprayers are easy to rent or to buy some inexpensive ones if you want to go that route. So yes, it's paintable. Yes, it works. I've tried it and I'm happy with the result. Definitely gives you a lot more options than the white and gray. Now for the question you've all been waiting for: how much does this stuff cost? I was super curious about this the second I saw it. I thought it's got to be crazy expensive. Now, obviously it is not as inexpensive as buying sheets of drywall, because drywall is not a finished product. It's just the first material that you put up, and then you have all the stuff that you have to do afterwards. So it does obviously cost a lot more than drywall. TrussCore provides some basic figures for different sizes of spaces on their website, as well as a calculator where you can put in your exact dimensions that you have, what colors you want to do, and it will give you an estimation of how much it's going to cost and help you build out a kit essentially that you can have shipped to you or you can pick up. A 20 by 20 garage, for example, is usually going to cost right around $4,000. I called some builder friends of mine and asked how much they charge, or how much does it cost to finish a 2-car garage like this, 20 by 20 space, and to have it mudded, taped, textured, painted, all that kind of stuff. And the range was $4,000 to $7,000. So pretty comparable. Now granted, that's the finished space. That's having someone do it all for you, where this, just the material, cost around $4,000. The big difference is, of course, this is watertight. I can come in here with a pressure washer and spray all this off. It's way more durable. I'm not going to have to worry about it, and it's way more DIY friendly. So if you have really any skill level with this kind of thing, you can come in here and do it. You don't have to have that skill of being able to texture. It's kind of an art form if you've ever seen someone do it. With this, just about anybody can handle installing a product like TrussCore. Overall, it actually ends up being a little bit cheaper, assuming that you're going to do it yourself at least. But the end result of the product is way more durable and just really a pretty awesome product. Quick side note, you can get this hoodie and the t-shirts that I wear, all kinds of DIY fun stuff, in my merch store. Links are in the description below. And now for some bonus features. I've already mentioned that TrussCore is watertight, so they actually encourage you to put some little weep holes along the trim on the bottom so that you can power wash this thing. Just spray it, whatever you need to, get aggressive with it if you have to. It's already watertight, but it's gonna make it so that when all the water drips down, it'll drip down onto the floor and out the garage door. On a similar note, just today, I was going through the car wash and I looked over, and what do I see on all of the walls? TrussCore, this exact stuff. It was installed vertically, and it's just these same PVC TrussCore panels all along the inside of that particular car wash. It definitely works. That place is being sprayed constantly and wet all the time, and it handles it just great. I've already mentioned how tough this stuff is, and I think that's just something that's just an absolute bonus when it comes to anything compared to drywall or sheetrock. This is way tougher. Another cool thing is it's antimicrobial. So we've seen a lot of cases where there are basically mildew and mold and different spores building and things like that in drywall when it gets wet or it's exposed to moisture, especially in areas where it's already very humid. Not an issue with TrussCore. Slat wall, that's another huge bonus. Think of it as like modern day pegboard, and it looks good in any install. I've seen a lot of people who are actually using this in basements or offices, in craft rooms, different things like that, because the slat wall itself allows you, it's kind of a modular system, and they have all these different accessories that you can get with it to put up shelves or hooks or containers or anything like that that you want to do, which is really nice. So it looks good, and it's actually very functional on the wall as well, as opposed to driving a bunch of screws and nails and picture hangers and things like that. Just a quick update on the slat wall accessories. When I talked to someone on the phone about this at Trustcore, they said, we admit our accessories, our hooks, different things like that are kind of on the expensive side. So they sent me a list of compatible brands that you can use instead of the Trustcore brand if you want to go that route. Now, being a little curious, I hopped on Amazon to see what compatible ones they had there and what their prices were, and I found this whole set. So everything that you see in black here, this was 36 bucks. There's a whole bunch of these, different sizes, different shapes, different lengths, all that sort of thing. Now these are metal and they have the rubber coating on them, so they're pretty tough, pretty high quality pieces here. 36 bucks for the whole thing. Definitely a way to do that a little bit cheaper than just buying the full price ones at Trustcore, but if you want to go with the brand name ones, obviously you can get those as well. One of the last bonuses that doesn't get talked about quite as much is the fact that this is a reflective surface, so it's actually super bright. Now, you don't always want this. In some cases that could be a con, but in a space like this where you just want to basically have as much light reflectivity as you can get, this is pretty awesome. And the last bonus feature is that if you're not a DIYer or you're really not up to doing this kind of thing yourself, there are a whole slew of certified professional installers who can handle the Trustcore installations for you. They go through a little training and some certification, and you can just have someone come and do that for you, just like you would with sheetrock or drywall or anything else. What about cons? Now, I've mostly been focusing on all of the good things about this product, and there are a lot. I really do think it's pretty awesome, but it's not perfect. There are some things that I wish were a little bit different. In a space like this, I'm going to want to install some upper cabinets, and they recommend that you actually don't install the upper cabinets right up against the truss core itself if you're going to be putting any sort of heavy weight in there. If you're just doing some light stuff and maybe even some medium duty stuff, that's probably fine. But they recommend that if you're going to be doing some heavy stuff, which I probably will, that on those upper cabinets that you actually cut out the space behind the cabinets. You cut out that rectangle shape or whatever it is for your particular cabinets, that you take some PVC pipe and cut it into little circles, little tubes essentially, that you put behind there and mount it to that instead. Generally speaking, not a huge deal, but there is the potential that too much weight against it is going to crush it or compact it, and neither of those are a good thing, so you want to be aware of that. I can already hear you now in the comments down below. Some people are going to say, I just don't like the look of it. So that's another con for some people. Personally, I really dig it. I think it looks really clean, it looks crisp, it looks sharp. I like it quite a bit. One of the big things that's going to get people though is having the little spaces in between, because it looks like panels, and not everybody likes that look. Now just FYI, you can install this either vertically or horizontally. It's up to you. It's just not for everybody. That's what it comes down to. Again, you can paint it, you can dress it up a little bit, but you're still going to have those little gaps there, and that's not something that everybody's going to like. So I would consider that a con as well, that it's not just one solid piece of wall. And I would be really tempted, honestly, to install, do a room and do it all solid with no gaps and see what the impact is, but they recommend that you don't. Another potential con is the cost, right? If you're going to DIY everything, which most people don't do, but let's say you wanted to, or you're maybe somewhat experienced even with doing the mudding and the taping and the texturing, the paint, all that kind of stuff. You want to do all of that yourself. It's going to be less expensive to do that yourself with drywall and those other few steps than to install truss core. It's going to take quite a bit longer, especially with all the waiting you have to do between coats and all of that kind of thing. And unless you're good at it, it might not turn out all that great. But if you are good at that or proficient at that, maybe you know some people who can help, that is going to be less expensive overall. So that's, again, it's a con in some cases, not in others, but just something to keep in mind. Now, one last con, again, a little subjective, but something that not everybody's going to like is having to do trim around everything. You don't get, like you do with drywall, you don't get to go right up against a window frame, for example, or you don't get to go right up against a door frame or another wall. You have to put a trim piece in there, and I think they look pretty sharp in general, and they're pretty subtle. They're kind of harder to see, especially if you're not just looking for them. Some people won't be into that, right? Just like some people won't like the aesthetic of the truss core panels themselves. So that's subjective, but something to keep in mind. Maybe the last big question I had when exploring this product was, is this a garage product? Is this something that's meant for garages, or are people using it in other spaces? So I went onto their website and I was actually really surprised at what I saw there. People are using this absolutely everywhere. Check this out. People are using it in bathrooms, in kitchens, in mudrooms, in laundry rooms, even in bedrooms, and in living rooms, in offices, in basements, all over the place, and especially when you combine the wall and ceiling boards or panels with the slat wall, it gives you that extra functionality that we talked about earlier. So I wouldn't be surprised to see this starting to take over more and more of the drywall market as people realize how functional it is, how tough it is, and how easy it is to install and maintain. So my question for you, what do you think? Is this something that you think you would use in your house? Would you use it in your garage, for example? And what are some of the pros and cons in your opinion? So I'd love to hear what you think down in the comments section below. For me, I am super happy with how this came out. And again, regardless of the company, I make zero money on anything that you buy or don't buy with TrustCore. Doesn't make any difference to me. I just feel like this is a cool product that people need to know about. So thanks for watching. Love to hear what you think. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and help me get to that 1,000,000 subscribers by the end of this year. I'm Nils with Learn to DIY. Thanks for watching.